Kentucky Ancestors is brought to you with support from the Kentucky Historical Society Foundation.
Today on Kentucky Ancestors, our researchers were asked to answer a family's question about a potential 18th century ancestor in early Kentucky family. This family mystery comes from Mason County, an area near and dear to my heart along the Ohio River in northeastern Kentucky. Join us as we share the details and explain the research methods that our experts at the Kentucky Historical Society use to document this story. Kentucky Ancestors starts now. Welcome to Kentucky Ancestors. I'm your host, Heather French Henry. Joining me today on stage is Kay Arthur. She's from the Dover-Maysville area here in Kentucky. Welcome to the show, Kay.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
It's so great to see you here. One, because I've grown up knowing your family since birth. We all know each other's family. And there's a lot of Mefford family in the area in Augusta, Dover, and Maysville. And you actually have brought a couple of your family members here today.
Yes, I have my two sisters, Peggy and Betty.
Excellent. All right, so the towns along the Ohio River are so beautiful, and if anybody hasn't been there, you certainly need to go, and they're rich in history. So our story begins along the Ohio River in Mason County near Maysville, or what early European settlers called Limestone. So Kay, you and I know this area very well, and you asked if your ancestor, Andrew Mefford, was a descendant of one of that area's earliest settlers, a man actually known locally as Flatboat George. So what do you actually know about the legend of Flatboat George?
Well, I know that he and his family came down the Ohio River on a flatboat. They landed at Limestone, and they took the lumber from the flatboat and they built a house.
Well, it's interesting because when we talk about the term and the name Flatboat George, and it comes from the description of the house that he built in limestone in the 1780s. Many European settlers made their way into Kentucky territory by actually traveling down the Ohio River, and the type of boat they often used was called a flatboat. Those of us who are from that area, I think we grew up in schools making miniature flatboats, and you see them on all of the historical television shows, but it's something we actually grew up, kind of a regular part of our history lesson, certainly.
Right.
And those flatboats they were simply made. They had logs covered with wood slats, and they were water sealed with a type of substance called tar pitch. But then after the construction, they floated down the river with only a wooden pole. Can you imagine on that river with a wooden pole rudder to guide the boat? No, kind of tough in those waters. And they went downstream following the current. But once they reached their destination, they were dismantled for other purposes or reused by people to travel further down the river. So such was the case in point where he actually used it to build his home, certainly. So Kay, you live close to the Ohio River. I was born on the Ohio River. We're basically river rats, as we sort of call that, right? So can you imagine putting your family and all of your prized possessions on a flatboat going down the Ohio River?
I can't imagine. They couldn't have had too many possessions, I wouldn't think.
No, in fact, a flatboat today wouldn't even hold my youngest daughter's, bedroom or clothes. But in 1785, brothers George and John Mefford, along with their families and a few neighbors, made the journey to Limestone, actually from Pennsylvania. So 2 years later, George moved down the road from Limestone and built his own fort for protection, which actually became known as Mefford's Fort. So you had your own fort, woohoo! Right? So George's family cabin was partially constructed from the wood of the flatboat that he used during the river migration, and this cabin actually still stands today in Washington, Kentucky. Let's learn more about the history actually of Washington, Maysville, and Mefford's cabin, and when we come back, we will dig deeper into your family story.
Years ago, when the 13 colonies got crowded and people wanted to travel west to get nice farmland, the settlers loved to come to this area because they found cane growing, and if you had cane, it showed that the soil would be rich. And they named it for General George Washington. It was before he was president. Washington came before the city of Maysville, which was first actually named Limestone. And Simon Kenton was the first here, and he built a little fort called Kenton Station. And he would invite the settlers to stay with him at his station so they would be safe. And he invited George Mefford. George Mefford has an interesting life. He and his wife and 13 children decided to move west after the Revolution. So they got a flatboat and they traveled down the river. We're inside Mefford's fort, and the boards from the flatboat are on the floor. They're the ceiling. And there's a little stairway that they used. Washington quickly grew, and when they did the census in 1790, it was the second largest city in the area of Kentucky. It was actually before Kentucky became a state, until the steamboat was invented and river traffic became popular.
With trade along the river, the landing became very important, and things built up downtown as far as business went.
In 1833, Marshall Key, a prominent businessman that lived here in Washington, had a daughter that he sent to boarding school in Cincinnati. While she was there, one of her teachers was Harriet Beecher, and another teacher was Mary Dutton, and she invited them to come for a visit in Washington. While they were there, Mr. Key thought they might be interested in walking up the street. So they walked up to the courthouse, and on the courthouse steps, they saw a slave auction. Harriet just observed quietly. But later, when Mary Dutton read Uncle Tom's Cabin, she recognized a lot of the scenes that she remembered.
Things that I've read talk about actually walking slaves all the way from Virginia into Kentucky, and then they would be marched overland or shipped on the river. The river made a big difference with everything that happened here. The Maysville and Mason County Library Historical and Scientific Association runs this operation to this day. So we began as the public library in Maysville in 1878. In 2007, we moved into this addition, which is about 30,000 square feet. And we still have a genealogical historical library for use by the public.
Hello, I'm Doug High, the director of the Kentucky Historical Society Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization that was created to support the Kentucky Historical Society and its mission to preserve and educate our shared Kentucky history in order to better meet the challenges of the future. And we do this through major gifts, grants, and endowments from groups and people just like you. Please consider a donation to the Kentucky Historical Society Foundation or by simply becoming a member at KHS.